only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. Visit us online at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton, and we're talking about things from a biblical and a historical point of view. And today, boy, David, this one is, well, we faced this in history before, and it's unfortunately ISIS now targeting families of our military servicemen and encouraging their supporters here in the U.S. to literally destroy those family members. They're trying to bring it to the homeland.
Yeah, they are trying to bring it to the homeland, and we have seen what they've done in other places. One of the folks here that works at WallBuilders got a text from a missionary friend that was watching kids be beheaded in front of the parents because they would not renounce their faith. And it was, I mean, what they did was barbaric. I mean, it was just flat barbaric. It is repulsive in every sense of the word. And so now they want to bring that barbarism, that terrorism. That's what terrorism is. It affects you psychologically. It instills a fear in you. They want to bring that to the United States by announcing that we're going after the military families. We're looking on Facebook and other social media to find the addresses of military families. We're going to show up and blow them away. And of course, that's a concern because if you're on a base, you don't get to carry a gun on base. So you're going after families knowing that they will not be able to defend themselves, knowing that that whoever the soldier is, man or woman, there won't be able to defend themselves either because they don't do that. We always used to think that military bases had guns. Nah, just MPs of bases basically have guns and a few others. But that's a wide open place. It's like going into a school or going into a church or something else, although now churches, most of them are armed, so it's not the same thing, but it is a real deal. And at some point, we're going to have to decide that we have to make an example out of ISIS. George Washington, in dealing 200 years ago with Muslim terrorists like this, he said, would to heaven that we had a navy able to reform those enemies to mankind or to crush them into non-existence. That's what you do. You put an example out there that don't mess with us. Leave us alone. We like being left alone. We're not going to get involved in your stuff, but don't mess with us. And we have not sent that message to ISIL. We have kept them very much alive and have refused to get involved. Now we're doing some strategic bombing, but they're already massively big and massively growing, and they've consolidated power. And so we're shutting the gate now, the horses out of the barn. So in looking at that, we thought a guy who's had to deal with terrorism up front is Colonel Brian Birdwell, who's now Texas Senator. He was in the Pentagon, got run over by the plane that hit the Pentagon. I mean, he's seen terrorism closer than any of us ever want to see it, been through 39 surgeries to repair what terrorists did to his body. This is very real to him, and he keeps up with it in a very real way. So he's going to be the right guy to comment on this story.
Colonel Brian Birdwell with us when we return. Stay with us right here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Often today, it seems that the federal government has become too intrusive into local matters, and federal micromanagement has now unfortunately become the norm in education, law enforcement, religious expressions, and even on what is and is not moral. Strikingly, the Founding Fathers had intended that the federal government never intrude into any of these issues. As Thomas Jefferson explained, taking from the states the moral rule of their citizens and subordinating it to the federal government would break up the foundations of the Union. I believe the states can best govern our home concerns and the federal government our foreign ones. According to Thomas Jefferson, the original plan was for the federal government to direct foreign affairs, but for the states and local communities to direct the domestic and the moral ones.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. Our good friend, Lieutenant Colonel and now Senator Brian Birdwell from Texas is with us. Senator, always good to have you, brother. Thanks for coming on, man.
It is a real treat to be with you, Rick. Thank you.
Hey, you were the first guy to come to mind when we saw this article regarding the Army warning the U.S. Military personnel because of ISIS now threatening family members of the military. And David said, man, let's get the Colonel on and see what he says about this. So what say you?
Well, it reminds us of just how dangerous a circumstance we're in. And let me expound on that ever so briefly. You may have people that, remember, our First Amendment right gives us the right to freedom of religion, but there are certain actions that within a religion that government should step in and say no. If, as an example, the tenet of a church was, human sacrifice, government's duty in protecting life is to step in and say, no, you don't get to practice that tenet.
Yeah.
As you're now dealing with a religion and an enemy in the Middle East that might very well have operatives here that are citizens, we are caught in that dynamic of protecting the rights of the citizens to believe what they wish to believe in that First Amendment freedom. But if they act upon it, at what point do we find ourselves having to act as a nation by saying, hey, you know what, as much as I love defending this nation and I would much prefer our enemies be foreign, we now have them domestic. And the dichotomy is that if you have enemies of this nation that are citizens of this nation, how do you handle that? Is it in a peacetime criminality aspect after the crime has occurred? Or is it from a wartime perspective where the standard of due process is much lower and not constitutionally protected? This is why what happened at Fort Hood in 2009 is so critical. Major Hassan, is he a citizen or not? Do we protect him as a citizen? Or if he's acted as an enemy combatant, do we now treat him as an enemy combatant and not a citizen? Because that question would determine whether or not those men and women that were killed and wounded get Purple Hearts or not. Because remember, you get a Purple Heart from enemy action, not from criminality.
And determines a lot about how we deal with him in terms of due process.
Yes, sir. Because remember what the Fifth Amendment says. It says, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. That specifies that those in uniform serving in a time of public danger or war are not protected by the Fifth Amendment's protections of grand jury indictment. But if you're protecting those with whom we're at war that happen to be citizens, look at the dichotomy that you're in. You're placing a greater protection on the citizen who may very well, in fact, be an antithesis to our nation and actually go after people that are serving our nation. And if we treat them with constitutional rights, even though they are acting as enemies, you see the dichotomy. We are broaching a subject that Lincoln had to deal with in the Civil War. That's what we're dealing with.
No,
here.
you're right on. And for people that say, "Oh, that's never going to happen here," I mean, just go to Oklahoma and the beheading there that took place. And here's what the ISIS guys said. They called on supporters to scour social media for the addresses of military personnel's family members and show up at their homes and slaughter them.
Yep.
And that's what they're talking about doing. And you can't, I mean, just being blunt here, you can't believe for a minute with the open border that we've had to our south for so many years that there are not some of these folks here and just ready and willing to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Because now you're dealing with the question of, remember, the Second Amendment as a God-given right, it's not about the gun, it's about self-preservation.
That's right.
I mean, it says to keep and bear arms. I mean, if that amendment had been written in the 13th century before gunpowder, we'd be talking about edged weapons. We might be talking about other electronic stun weapons, half a century from now that amendment will still be just as applicable. It's just that right now, the firearm's the most lethal and effective means of preserving one's life.
Okay, I hate to take a sidetrack here, but did you just say that I'm someday going to have a Star Trek gun that I can set to stun? Is that what you just told me?
You know, I mean,
that would just be
laser-based
cool.
weapons. I mean, who knows? I mean,
I mean, can I use it on, you know, like around the house with the kids? That'd be kind of fun.
Well, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just
okay.
my mind went there when you said that. I know we're on a very serious topic, but you're dead on. I mean, it's about self-defense, whatever the weapons in the culture might be.
Right. And so now, when you look at what happened at Fort Hood last year with the shooting that did not appear to be Islamic-based, like the Major Hassan shooting was, but you had the shooting at Fort Hood, and men and women on post that live in where I've been one of those guys, you know, lived off post, lived on post. While on post, you know, didn't carry a weapon. While living on post, I could keep firearms in my home, but the military police detachment for that installation, you know, was made aware of those weapons. I could keep weapons at home if I lived off post based upon civil authority and what living off post, non-federal property was. But the point is that if we've got an enemy that is now going to search out military personnel, it isn't just active. I'm sure that there's a good chance that they'd come after guys like me that are retired or may have served their 3, 4, 5 years and got out. But you're talking about some sort of an enemy retribution that their faith tells them to come slaughter us.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with places that are whether it's in states or like here in Texas on our public universities? If you're a CHL holder, you can't go on to that university with your CHL.
Yeah, so you're sitting ducks. I mean, and these guys know that. They're not stupid. They research that. They know where they're going to have easy pickings.
Yeah, so there's a number of things in question here that not only from a federal perspective of dealing with enemies. Look, please feel free to use this line anywhere you wish. Look, I prefer my enemies the same way I prefer my diseases, foreign as opposed to domestic. Okay? I want Ebola over there, not over here. I want enemies over there, not over here.
Yeah.
And when you look at the border, it isn't just simply, I mean, 40% of our border security problem are directly related to what happened to me on September 11th. They did not come across our southern border. 18 of the 19 hijackers came to this country legally and then overstayed their visa.
And nobody bothered to send them home.
And we have no mechanism to even go find them. I mean, Breitbart had a story back in early September that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency said that of the 50-something thousand student visas they've lost track of, 6,000 of them caused them concern.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, then why did you give visas to those 6,000 if they caused you? And so, you know, clearly our southern border is a flank that is begging to be guarded.
But the whole system itself needs a major, major overhaul.
Yeah, I mean, not only do we have to have a mechanism that if you overstay your visa, you're getting a knock from somebody at Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I mean, our entire immigration judicial system, the judiciary function within the immigration system is broken.
Yeah.
And it needs to be tightened up. So I'm very guarded to say the words immigration reform because that generally with the public that means, you know, it's all about amnesty. In my view, reform is we need to tighten the shot group to make it harder.
Yeah.
And so that if you do come here, there's a mechanism enforcement that says your visa expired yesterday, you're cordially demanded to go home.
Yeah, no doubt. Got to take a very quick break. Colonel Brian Birdwell is our guest. Stay with us, folks. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. America has a history of great patriots who loved and sacrificed much for their country. One of these was John Witherspoon, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. While president at Princeton, he personally trained many who became important leaders in American government, including James Madison. How could John Witherspoon tell if someone really loved America? He explained, "He is the best friend to American liberty, who is most sincere and active in promoting true and undefiled religion, and who sets himself with the greatest firmness to bear down profanity and immorality of every kind. Whoever is an avowed enemy of God, I hesitate not to call him an enemy to his country." Founding Father John Witherspoon believed that a true American patriot opposed profanity and immorality and promoted true and undefiled religion.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Senator Brian Birdwell, our guest today. We're talking about the threat from ISIS actually encouraging their supporters and the folks that they're recruiting to find family members of our military personnel and show up at their homes and, quote, slaughter them.
Right.
Brian, I had, at the end of that article, it talked about that their terror network is recruiting upwards of 3,400 people a month through social media.
Yeah.
That's shocking.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I don't know where they're all coming from. I know we've had I don't have specific numbers or such, but I know that
do you think there's fertile
Security,
ground here? I mean, do you think that with all the anti-American sentiment that we've spewed through our universities and education system over the last 20, 25, 30 years, I mean, have we kind of set ourselves up to be fertile ground for these guys to recruit people here?
I think I'd be very careful in how I answer this question, because when you talk about the First Amendment and that freedom of religion, that means that mosques can set up, temples can set up, and churches or people that are of no faith don't have to go to proclaim one. So in guarding that religious liberty, our founders very much believed, you and I and David have talked about this, that in the free market of faith, Christianity would be the winner in the marketplace based upon Christianity's message of man's redemption, God's plan for man's redemption of mankind, whereas other religions, while valid religions with which to be a part of, their version of man's redemption was very different than Christianity, and in that worldview, Christianity would win out. I think with the amount of people that have either been imported, allowed to come into the country without much thought to the security of the American people or the culture of the country remaining strong and free, that there's a good chance that there is a lot of homegrown terrorism. Where we're finding them, how we're finding them, or how we're identifying them within the confines of the Bill of Rights, because you want to make sure you're protecting those rights.
Yeah, it's a balancing act.
That makes fighting this extremely difficult, and we are approaching days, like I said, in our nation right now, that the last time we had this type of insurrection or type of internal strife in dealing with an enemy internally was the Civil War, where I believe it's the Article 4 of the U.S. Constitution is the one that talks about habeas corpus can be suspended in time of public danger. Who defines that? The Congress or the President? This is the kind of thing that will provide great amount of strife for the nation to try to solve while protecting innocence, not protecting the guilty, but making sure that we don't determine somebody guilty that shouldn't be determined guilty.
Yeah.
This is very difficult. And that's the strategic level. And when you look at the operational and tactical, what do you do with soldiers that right now that live off post, that driving onto military installations, federal regulation, DOD, Department of Defense regulations say you cannot bring your firearms on post, even if you have a CHL. And so in that transition between, at the end of the workday, I'm going home, I'm unarmed until I get home, even though I'm off post and off federal property. So there's a tactical application to how to defend yourself, and then there's the strategic of how do we as a nation define how you fight an enemy among us.
A lot of tough issues, man.
Yes, sir.
A lot of tough issues. What? But I think maybe waking up to how difficult this is going to be, because I mean we haven't. I don't know. I would argue that this administration has not taken it serious enough over the last few years. They've almost kind of said, oh, we kind of won that war on terror thing. It's pretty much over. Now it's obviously a wake up call that not even close.
No, it isn't, because I mean even you and I had discussed this before, even before bin Laden was killed. Is the war on terror over the minute after bin Laden's dead? No, because he's just a single person that's a reflection of the culture of death that loves killing either us as Americans or infidels in general. That's not an enemy that, when we talk about moderate elements of, people in the Middle East that with whom we can work. I mean, moderate in compared to what? Yeah. I mean, that's the nature of the enemy that we're dealing with. And Rick, I wish I had the answer. But kind of like my diseases, I like my enemies foreign as opposed to domestic. And the number one mission of the federal government is to protect the people of the United States, whether it's disease-related like you're seeing with Ebola, or making sure that people from other countries that are coming here, that there's some sort of a screening background and confidence that the people that we're allowing to come here for a period of time are not subversive to the culture and people of the United States, and even if they're not and they come here for that time, that there's a mechanism to enforce returning them to their homeland.
Yeah, those are exactly the right steps in the right direction. It's going to be a long haul, bro. All right, man, we're out of time for today. I appreciate you coming on so much. Thanks for the good work you do in our Texas legislature as well. We're sure glad you're there.
Thank you, Rick. I greatly appreciate it. My privilege to be with you, sir.
That's Senator Brian Birdwell. Back in a moment with David Barton. Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty, and Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at WallBuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
We're back here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Back with David Barton now. David, big issues, obviously some tough issues, but it's this is not an issue to be taken lightly, and it is going to be brought to our shores. We got to be ready and willing to fight this like it's going to have to be fought to win.
Well, I tell you, he's so much fun in so many ways. I mean, you heard him on the Constitution, you heard him on history, you heard him communicate this stuff, you heard him deal with really technical issues constitutionally that can go in two directions, and he's very well informed. How would you like to have him as your state senator?
Oh, man, yeah.
Let's have a bunch more like Brian. But this is a guy that is very deep and very, very, very good, just a great guy. I love his rhetoric because as he was even talking about immigration and what that means and et cetera, he says, my idea of reform is to tighten the shot group to make it harder. A shot group. Now, who talks like that? Right. A guy from the military who is the artillery guy. I mean, it's really, he talks like George Washington, I want to crush those guys into non-existence. The other thing I thought that was really significant he talked about was we're now allowing immigrants to come into this country without any regard for the safety of the nation, as we're seeing with ISIS. But he also said, or the culture of the nation. And that was a really significant point, because we're allowing people to come in now just because they want to come in. It's no longer, are you going to be a domestic enemy? What is your philosophy of America? Do you actually like America? Are you coming here? We don't even care about the culture of America anymore. We're just taking anybody who wants to come. And if they want to do damage to us, that's fine. And I've been in London twice when bombings happened in London. One, they attacked an airport, another, the subway bombing. And they have such an open immigration policy in England because they're part of the EU and open borders all the way around, that they actually asked the poll there in England among those who were living in England. And, you know, compare the freedom with England with any Muslim nation in the world. England's got it hands down. And yet they found that 23% of those living in England would be happy to blow up England. And you're going, really? This is what open borders does, is now 1/4 of the people living in your country are essentially enemy, or willing to be enemy combatants.
Yeah. Why are you here if that's the way you feel about our country? Yeah.
And that's a question we should have been asking a long time ago. But Brian, you know, he's got a handle on this, and he's got good wisdom on it, and it's a good perspective on that threat to military families.
Yeah, we'll have to get him back soon. Thank you so much for listening today, folks. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand under